Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, or good day, wherever you are in the world, and welcome to the next episode of No Dice, No Glory. Sponsored by our jobs that actually pay us money, we're coming to you not at all live from an abandoned arms factory deep under a mountain in West Virginia. We are proud to proffer to you the finest in wargaming coverage. Without any further ado, let's get this show on the road.
Well, thank you for that rousing introduction. And hey, I am here at the Connections Wargaming event in Carlisle, PA. And I am here with, as I've been calling you for the last few days, Mr. Connections. I'm here with Matt Caffrey, who also wrote the book on wargaming, which I think we'll probably get to. But hey, welcome, Matt.
Thank you.
And thanks for coming and talking to me. So tell me about Connections Wargaming.
Okay. Since Connections was founded in 1993, the mission has been pretty much unchanged. It's to advance the art, science, and advance and sustain the art, science, and application of wargaming. And each of those words are chosen very, very closely.
Of course.
There's a bit of a debate as to whether or not wargaming is an art or a science. And my answer to that is yes. Wargaming is very much like architecture. Some people say, well, architecture is art. Well, I went to an engineering school, then Newark College of Engineering, now New Jersey Institute of Technology, and we had an architecture school. And all the architects were required to take Civil Engineering 101 and Mechanical Engineering 101 because it was nice to create a very pretty building, but that pretty building had to, stand up.
It had to do something that it was intended for.
Yes.
Well, as a guy that did ROTC at NJIT for a year.
Ah, very good.
So we have that in common as well. So you talk about the art and science, and looking around at the folks here, tell us about, the folks that come to this.
We, very much by design, this is a very eclectic organization. We have each of the armed services. We have the joint community. We have people from the OSD staff here. And then we also have civilian academics. That gaming and wargaming is taught at more and more universities today. And then we've also tried very hard to get people from the commercial wargaming industry here. And if you think about it, a lot of the new ideas are going to come from the commercial side because they've got this international competition where you can buy your wargame from a publisher anywhere. And it needs to be user-friendly or you don't buy from that publisher again. So you've got the competition of the free marketplace really helping the best stuff raise to the top. And so it helps the military wargamers to learn about the stuff that's almost always more user-friendly. And it helps the civilian wargamers hear about what's going on in direct support of the armed forces.
And I'll tell you, this is, as I was posting pictures for the last few days, people were saying, I thought you were supposed to be at a conference. This is not a convention. It has a convention feel, and I'll get into that with you later, folks. But this is a very eclectic group, as Matt said, of academics, guys from all over the DOD. We have how many foreigners here?
10
Speaking of foreigners, yeah, there we go.
We set our new record this year. Our old record was 6 nations in addition to the U.S. This year we're up to 10.
Because I see some of the Canadian, and it's funny, both Canadians you have.
Yes.
One is from Australia, and the other guy's from, I'm going to say Scotland, but he's pretty close, from Northern England. So they're funny talking Canadians, but they're folks from all over here, and it's just kind of interesting to see the community here.
Yep.
So there are 4 of these a year, and they're free. It's open to anybody that has an interest, I believe. Are they all free, the Connections?
There's actually several different Connections conferences. In 93, the United Kingdom was the first nation to start a Connections in addition to the U.S. And then Australia started a Connections conference. The Netherlands, Canada calls their Connections conference Canadian Connections North. And then this coming January, for the first time, the French will be holding a Connections conference.
Wow.
So it's really become quite international. And, you were saying who is here. We have, of course, Canada, Germany, the Netherlands, South Africa. We have Korea represented, France, the Czech Republic, and the United Kingdom. So, and I'm really, really happy these guys are here because one of the whole ideas about Connections is you learn the best practices from people. That there's things the Air Force is doing better than anybody else, there's things the Marines are doing well, there's things the Brits are doing well, and if we can get as big of a gene pool together as possible, we can learn the best ideas from everybody, and we can create things that no one of us could create alone.
Yeah, so it is a learning environment for people out there, even though you may have seen pictures we posted of people gaming, because part of this, too, is, and it's always been my approach, is that there's a culture that wargamers seem to share. And let me go back into Matt's history. Yes, he's Mr. Connections, I like to call him, but you are a big board wargamer, aren't you, sir?
Oh, yeah.
What was your first?
My first was Africa Corps.
By Avalon Hill.
By Avalon Hill. And I actually designed my first wargame in 1966. I was in 8th grade at the time.
Uh-oh.
And then I did another one a couple years later. And then in high school, I was introduced to Avalon Hill Wargames. And my first reaction was, hexes. Oh, why didn't I think of that?
Because Tactics 2 did not have hexes.
Well, the wargames I invented used topographical maps.
Okay.
They used little squares of construction paper that was about the size of wargame counters. And I had you go, I go, but I had no idea that other war games existed. I thought I was inventing them for the first time. And so when I saw these things in high school, it was like, oh, other people have done this before.
So to this day, what is your all-time favorite?
Oh, boy, that's tough. There's so many good ones out there. And it's really like what's best for what. Like, if I had to pick one, it would probably be Fortress Europa, because it really, and it does air power well in that it's really about the invasion, but you have only so much air power, and it can be done any way, for any application.
So I think he listens, Gene from GMT.
Yep.
They're redoing it. And I got to proofread the rules.
Ah, very good.
So the old Fortress Europa, and I'm like, and I made the mistake, like, oh, this is the old D-Day. And he's like, no, sir,
no.
It's the old Fortress Europa.
Much better.
And I'm like, yeah. And it's funny because there's a guy here playing D-Day, the old Avalon Hill game. I'll tell you which map I always liked was the old Anzio game.
Oh, yes.
And it had that colorful map, and it had, like, the colorful counters.
Yes. Probably the most sophisticated game of its time.
Yeah. And I can't find an old copy to save my life. Oh, you have one?
Yes, of course.
Do you know what I recently bought was, you remember Arab-Israeli War?
Oh, yeah, I have that one too.
I picked that up because Panzer Leader, Panzer Blitz. So, we talk about these games, but going through, and if you look at the pictures from the other day, folks are here playing games like that. And it's just interesting how this community of academics and DoD wargamers really have a lot in common with that community.
Oh, absolutely. Well, a lot of the best DoD wargamers started out on Avalon Hill and Victory Games and Strategy and Tactics and all that. And you really do get learning by doing. One of the things that I think is very powerful about wargaming, in an earlier life when I was a captain at Nellis, I was running this thing called Project Warrior.
I remember Project Warrior.
It was an idea to try to get Air Force guys to identify as warriors, not as pilots or navigators or engineers. And I was of the philosophy that the reason that General Motors sells so many cars is they have cheap cars, expensive cars, little cars, big cars. So I'd have a guest speaker every month, I'd have a movie every month, I'd have a book discussion. That had the least people. I had the wargamers, and the people who would see the talks would go to the talks every month. The books would, the three of us would talk. But the wargamers started to go to the talks, and one went to the books and to the movies. And I'm like, I thought you guys were into wargames. Why are you here at this talk? Because, I lost to Charlie last week. And this guy's talking about that fight.
Okay.
And maybe I can get some ideas from Charlie that might help me beat Charlie next time. So you really find that playing war games, I think, helps you better understand military history overall, and I think it helps you understand, current military endeavors even more.
So let's say I find this podcast somewhere on the Ethernet, the internet. And I have just been told that my next assignment is in a wargaming branch somewhere. Because I met a guy from General Motors that's here talking about General Motors wargaming.
Okay.
And I'll get into my impressions in a minute. So why should I come to Connections? Let's do some arm twisting here. Why would that guy, brand new, doesn't know a lot about wargaming maybe, why should Connections be on my schedule?
Because Connections is designed right from the get-go for people who didn't know a lot about wargaming. From the very first Connections in '93, we've included a first-timer segment. In the beginning, we just started the conference with introductory stuff. And then we realized that people were coming back year after year, so we split it off to a separate day. The first day was for the first-timers. And then we realized all the regulars were coming the first day. And they were like, you guys know this stuff. Yeah, but we can't miss the opportunity to be with other wargamers. So we added seminars on all sorts of subjects. So if you're brand new to wargaming, or if this is your second assignment in wargaming, there's something on the first day of Connections that you don't already know. So we have stuff on all the different aspects of wargaming and an introduction for somebody who just absolutely doesn't know anything. And so if you go to that in the beginning and you now know the vocabulary of wargaming, you have an introduction, then you better understand the rest of the conference. And much of the rest of the conference is then going into greater detail in different aspects of wargaming. We travel from city to city to city each year, in part so we don't wear out our welcome.
Okay.
In part because nobody does this for a living. I have a day job.
I do too. People don't realize that, but I do too.
Yes. Co-chair Tim Wilkie works for National Defense University. I work for Air Force Research Lab. There's no fee to come to Connections. The money you pay just covers food. So we need a place that's free to hold this, and so different wargaming organizations host us. And the two big benefits of hosting is you get to pick the theme for the year's Connections conference that you're hosting, and organizations pick a theme of an area where they need help in, where they're trying to push the envelope of wargaming. And then the other benefit an organization gets by hosting is that by holding it at their location, a lot more of the members of that organization can participate in Connections.
Yeah.
So we're at the Army War College this year. They have a 30-man wargaming department, and I asked them how many of the 30 were they able to spare to come to the conference.
I think all of them are here.
And they said the 30.
Yes. And and you soft-sold that, if I can, sir. It's not adversarial. So Connections is the name of the conference, and I have run across people from all over the defense industry. I've run into such a diverse group of people here, and making connections like, hey, have you guys wargamed this? And like, hey, I'm going to share this information with you. I think it's amazing. I think if you're out there and you run a gaming branch, or even better, if you've been assigned to start up a wargaming branch, come here, because I think the folks that you'll meet, everybody here is like-minded, and you're like, geez, I don't have to do this all on my own. So I've been totally impressed with the folks that are here, except for the Canadians. But they're good guys. Coming here, I just think it is, if I am anywhere in the wargaming realm, to come here. And then I'll throw a shout-out, too, to the hobby gamers, as I like to call it. Mm-hmm. It's to have them come here. So I ran 2 games while I was here. And people must have liked them because I have 10 of these things.
All right.
Yeah.
Very good.
Well, I lost 2 of them. So, and, showing them games from the hobby community. But I always ask the question, does this represent the conflict that it portrays? Mm-hmm. Do you see how capabilities are defined? And folks that are DoD wargamers, even though they don't want to play with little army men or move pieces of cardboard around, learn stuff from mechanics, from ways of presentation. And to me, I think seeing that and showing folks, because, yes, we played Blood and Plunder yesterday, it's Age of Pirates, and people said, great-looking table, pulls them in. At the end, I said, okay, so let me ask you these questions. And it was a great talking to the folks from Picatinny about, hey, we have this problem. And it was an amazing way to kind of springboard. Let me send you some stuff that we've been working on in the Air Force.
Yep.
That the communities can share from each other more than you know.
Absolutely, steal from each other. And we shouldn't, there are people that win the lottery, and there's this perception that you've got the DoD wargamers over here and the commercial wargamers over there. Every now and then, there's a commercial product that can be used exactly as it is off the shelf. A couple of connections ago, I talked to the faculty member at the Annapolis who was using Dark Waters in his class. And I asked him if you just got a call from the chief of naval operations and he's going to give you $1 million to tailor it to be exactly what you want, what would you change? And he looked me straight in the eye and he said, I wouldn't change the box art. So every now and then you get lucky. Now, what's much more common, though, is we have a professor here at the Army War College that's teaching a course in the strategic level campaign planning, where you're looking at not only military operations, but international relations and all that. And he found a commercial off-the-shelf game that wasn't exactly what he needed, but he was able to make some modifications to the map, add a couple of dimensions that weren't already in the game, and got a fully functional game that he's been able to use in his course several semesters now.
You want to drop the name of the game?
I think he started with Breaking the Chains, a compass game, and then he switched to another compass game because it was more nearly the right fit, and then he modified the second compass game, and I don't remember the name of the second one.
The one about Afghanistan, I believe?
No, it was also
global.
The Southeast Asia, Spratly Islands, and all that, South China Sea game. Maybe it was called South China Sea, but anyway, and so you see that a lot where, and it's not a new phenomena. In the 1990s, the Marine Corps, and they came and talked to us at Connections about it. They still have a problem, and they have their guys get very, very well trained. These Marine amphibious units, and then they put them on a ship for 6 months, and they can do chin-ups and they can run around the deck a little bit, but they're like in a can, and so it's hard to maintain fire team proficiency. So one of their captains had an idea of reskinning Doom and turning it into a fire team training, because you could network 4 players at once.
And there was a computer game, Close Combat Marine, that was adapted just for them.
Yeah. But this was even before that, because this proved the principle. It led to that. But basically, what they told the story here at Connections is they called up the publisher to make sure it was okay, because they said all they had to do was like substitute flat files, and there was a tech sergeant who could do it. And they said, yeah, sure, go ahead. My Marine Corps, what a compliment. That's great. Says, okay, could you put that in writing for us, sir? And he's like, it's my company. Go ahead and do it. Said, no, we're the government.
Yeah.
We need something in writing. And he's like, all right. So a couple of days later, this big cardboard box arrives in their space, and it has this sheet of company letterhead with in pen written, I hereby grant the United States Marine Corps the rights to use my game any way they want, for as long as they want, wherever they want, to do whatever they want, signed President of the company. And underneath the letter was 24 copies of Doom.
Not bad. Yeah, and that's something, too. Like, I just had lunch with, I forgot his name, from Decision Games.
Oh, yes.
So all of us in our A5SW Wargaming shop are buying Uwe's games over here,
yes.
His whole games. But, when you reach out to the commercial world, I've never gotten a hard no from any of them, because they understand, and it's one of those things like, okay, if they're going to use my games, they must be pretty good.
That's right. It's, and patriotic people, and like you say, it's an endorsement. Frank Chadwick is one of the most prolific war game designers out there.
I know.
He's done a lot of
know the name.
Good games. Well, he has on the wall of his study this letter he got from Saudi Arabia during the first Gulf War, where they were using one of his games in the battalion to rehearse their part of the operation, and this sandstorm came along and blew the map, the counters, the rules, everything out into the desert. And so they wrote to Frank Chadwick, and they said, We can't tell you how soon we need a copy of the game, but could you send it to us really, really fast?
I am sure he did.
And he did, and that letter is still on his wall, and he just sent it to them, and that's the type of support we get.
Yeah, it's been awesome. So I'm going to get to number 2 before we let you go back to your busy day. So about 6-7 weeks ago, I threw something on Facebook on my site.
Thank you.
And I'm going to send you the date. I want to know how many of our guys hit it. I mean, downloaded your book. Sorry about that. So for those of you that don't know, On Wargaming is a book that you've been working on for 15 years. It came out in the February-April timeframe.
Right.
It's a big book. I'm looking at it now. I actually read it over a weekend. I dedicated myself to, I'm going to read it, and I could talk about it, but you wrote it. So let me hear about On Wargaming.
Okay, very good. Well, it sort of started in 1988. I did my master's thesis on the history of wargaming, and it sort of started before that. In high school, I read this book called The Bomb in the Computer, and one of the things that I drew from that was that wargaming done right can really save lives. And how do you do it right? I had a sense that if you learn more about the history of wargaming, you'd have some insights into how to do it effectively. So during the time of my master's thesis, I became increasingly convinced that, it helps to do wargaming right. It really helps to do it better than your adversary. And so how do you know if you're doing it better than your adversary? Well, if you're trying to get a better airplane than your adversary, you put a model of it in a wind tunnel and you see what the lift and the drag is, but you can't put war in a wind tunnel. So how do you experiment?
Unless you're in Saudi Arabia getting ready for... Okay.
and the thing goes off into the desert, yes. But, like astronomy, like meteorology, you have to find natural experiments. You have to find times when there's eclipses or find times when hurricanes behave a certain way, and you can study it. And so I felt that if you could study particularly times when a war game was conducted and then the subject of the war game actually took place, that the operation was conducted, and then was it the same or was it different? If it was different, could you figure out what made it different? And that would give you some insights. So that was the primary motivation for the game. The other thing is, if war games save lives, then people who have advanced the state of the art of wargaming should really be recognized for that. We know Pasteur and we know Edison and we know people who have made contributions in other fields. I'm Air Force, and until I did all this reading, I had never heard the name Moody Souter. And he did amazing stuff during his career. Few Navy guys, their Navy's a little less bad, but few Navy guys know about McCarty Little, or Army guys know about
the Wargaming building is named after McCarty Little.
That helped.
Yeah,
that helped. And finally, Moody Souter got a building named after him, but not until after he passed away. But, this guy, if I can divert for a few seconds, as a captain, he was one of 3 guys that got the aggressor squadrons established. Then as a major, he talked the 4-star in charge attack to set up this thing called Red Flag.
Wasn't it General Creech, the 4-star?
No, I think it was actually before Creech.
Oh.
But anyway, and then as a lieutenant colonel, and you're on the air staff, you know what big shots lieutenant colonels are in the Pentagon.
Oh, yeah.
2 for a nickel, right?
Yeah.
He got Checkmate established,
the
strategy cell. And then as a full colonel, he stood up the Warrior Preparation Center in Germany and had to retire after 30 years because it didn't make flag rank. And you look at all this and what does it take to make flag rank? Well, what was particularly sad about the story is that he came up on his 30-year mandatory retirement 6 weeks before the Warrior Preparation Center was activated. So he didn't get to have his picture on the wall as one of the first commander.
Wow.
And I just really shabby. And then unfortunately after he passed away, they kind of made up for it a little bit by naming the building after him.
It's nice that they could do that.
And so that story of him is in the book. So there's things you can learn from the history of wargaming about what works and what doesn't work, and when it doesn't work, what are the things that tend to cause it not to work, what are some of the big names, just a chronology, and that's like the first 2/3 of the book. Then the final third of the book is, all right, now that we have all this data, what can we conclude about wargaming? And I talk about what does commanders need to understand about wargaming?
Right.
What do wargame practitioners need to know about wargaming? If you're told, not that you're going to be in a wargaming department, but just you're being sent to participate in one of these big wargames, what do you need to know so that you can participate more effectively? And then the final chapter says it's not just people in the military.
I was about to get to that.
Are there things about wargaming that can help you be a better parent?
Yeah, that is the I like the book, and I still have your review that's ready to go out because I figured I would do this interview first. It goes through the history. We are not alone. We have a lineage, and just as you mentioned a few names here, like I knew McCarty Little, but here's a guy that was in my own service. Yeah. I didn't know that much about. Yeah. Then you read the book, you understand, and there's practical uses, and you say, "Yep, wargaming saves lives." And I always thought there should be St. John Hill or somebody, we just had a big gamer designer pass, Richard Berg, definitely up for canonization.
Yeah.
I think that you learn about this. One of the things I was most, that was remarkable to me is I do a lot of posts about games on Facebook with the website, and there's always people that come out and troll it. No, that's wrong, this is wrong. Everybody that left a comment, and I think it was like 70 or so comments, I'm downloading it, I'm reading it, send me the link, it's not working where I am, and I will put the link obviously on this when it comes out, but everybody I know really got something out of it. You don't need to read the entire book. If the history of wargaming isn't for you, and you have it broken down into 3 sections, I believe, you could go to application of war games. To me, I think it's great. I wish that it wasn't done by Naval Press, because you could have retired. Well, and I'm glad you're not retiring after coming out with this. But I really think like the book is good, and for the second printing, yes. I'm just going to give a plug that you could put our website on it.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, what you guys don't know, but my interviewer knows, is that there's an old Air University tradition that if you do any work at all on duty on a book, the Air Force will then print it through AU Press. You don't see a penny. But if you take it home and change the dedication from "to my lovely wife" to "my loving wife," then you can do a second edition, and you do get to keep the royalties. And in fairness, I did all the typing after duty hours, but there was a lot of emails back and forth asking people questions and doing stuff. So it was the right thing to do, but every time I see the number of downloads and how well this is doing.
How many downloads are you down to today? Or the last time you checked?
The last time I checked was like 2 or 3 days ago, and it was like 4,368 or something.
I know that when I put your thing out, a lot of people, well, it's free books. And, it's one of those things that, if I have it on my bookshelf, people will think I'm an expert at this. I actually have this book on my shelf at work. I think I showed you the last time you were there. And it's the office copy. It's what I don't tell, because we only got one for the office. But I did download, I did read it. I'm going to recommend everybody, I'll put another link on, and then I'll see if it gets bumped up, that let's make this the #1 book in Naval Press history.
Well, it is for this series. I didn't check the other series. It's part of the Newport Papers, and there's 44 books in the series. And a couple months ago, when I had just gone over 2,000 downloads, I went and I checked, and I'm not this conceited. It was that a guy was going to meet me for lunch, and he was late, and he was late, and he was late. So absent-minded, I'm going through the other titles, and the other 43 titles added together are a little over 2,000. And so this one title is
I wasn't going to mention that, so thanks for mentioning
twice all the other titles added together.
Well, I mean, a 700-page book on the Portuguese river flotillas in Mozambique is not going to pull people, but let's look at wargaming as a hobby. It's massive. It's a billions of dollars a year industry that has multifaceted with PCs, board war games, with miniatures. So to me, it's not surprising it did that well. I know I was at the degree game at Naval War College when it came out, and the guy that was heading up my cell, one of the adjudicators, had it, and people were just coming over and like, hey, you could download it for free. And I was looking all over at Naval War College to see if they had them laying around. So if you see a paper copy, they're a little tougher to get, but you can download it, and you will enjoy it.
Yeah, it should be back in print any day now. Today's date is what, like the 15th of August or something?
I think something like that, yeah.
They said that it should, because I ordered more, and it should be at my house before the end of August.
Awesome.
So it should be getting back into print. Yeah, just another indication of how well this is doing. The government printing office, it's tough because they print a lot of stuff, but their kind of rule of thumb is they want stuff to stay in print for at least a year, but they don't want to keep the inventory more than like 2 or 3 years. So they try to print, Kentucky windage, that number of copies. This book sold out in 15 days.
Yeah, I know. So that's why I'm glad I have a copy.
Yeah.
So, and then everybody says, can I borrow it? And I'm like, I'm doing a review on it. They don't know I already read it over a weekend. And it's like, because I know once it's gone, I will never see the physical copy again. But, we're coming up on a half hour, and that's usually when people start falling asleep. But, man, it's been great working with you for the last couple of months. I love this event, and I'm going to recommend it, to anybody out there that's listening to this. This is such an amazing thing to come to for the Connections. I think it is definitely worthwhile. It opened my eyes that I know, okay, I have a TTX next week, but when I get back to the office in 2 weeks, I know there's some things I want to do differently. And to me, if this old horse could learn a new trick, it's awesome. So, Matt, I would like to thank you very much, and I'm going to send it back to the studio.
Mr. Reed, can I have your autograph, please?
No, actually, I'm going to talk to you next, sir, and I'll send it back to you to studio. Matt, thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Hey, well, we're back, and I'm still at the Connections Wargaming Conference at Carlisle, PA, but now I have not Mr. Connections, but a guy that I know your name. I'm trying to drum it up a little bit too. Who I've been in contact with off and on, first time meeting too. But I'm not going to say your name wrong because I'm thinking about it now. Uwe Eckert from Academy Games. Which, okay, this is a shameless plug, and I get told that sometimes we sound like homers, but I've been in love with your Conflict of Heroes series for a very long time now, and very happy that third edition's coming out, but we could talk about that in a minute.
Well, thank you, Mitch, because I've been in love with you for years, so it's nice to hear it back.
So what people there don't know is you sent me a very interesting text message to make sure I knew it was you, and when I saw it, it just pops up a little bit of it.
We are not going to say what that was for your wife.
No, I know, and I'm like,
for you.
it got me a little excited for a minute, so I'm glad I'm talking to you.
I was trying to get you in trouble with your wife, but that's all it was.
She would think, wait, he's outsourcing? I'm fine with that. All right, so we're ready to go. So you've been going to Connections for quite some time.
Yeah, several years now.
And what do you get out of it? What drives you here year after year?
Well, from Connections, what's so interesting is all the different viewpoints. And speaking with other people in my industry, in the DOD, different departments, and just the exchange of information, that's really key. And from my standpoint, being from German background where we're taught much more critical thinking and different things, it really brings a nice conversation starting points to get going. Mm-hmm. So that's why. And all the people here are smart. I mean, they're smart.
I appreciate that.
Thinkers.
Thank you. I think
and that's what the average intuitive and creative brain power here is so much higher than you can find in most other places.
But with that said, I was at your briefing the other day, and I'm going to have to cheat here and look at it. And it was the war cry, combat cohesion, cognitive capacity, disintegration.
Correct.
That is. And what I started seeing was paradigm paralysis from some of our long-term DOD retired members where you were trying to explain something and they kept falling back to, you go back to what you know.
Right. The heuristic biases, yeah.
heuristic biases, and they're like, training will take over, will take over, and I don't know if you felt that message was resonating.
Well, the exact people that I was trying to get to, it wasn't getting to.
Yes.
And the biggie thing is that in any type of stressful situation, the relative reactionary response that you're expecting from a leader, which is if you're looking at a probability curve, you know they're going to react in a certain way due to their training, due to their, as I say, over and over inputted indoctrination of how they should react, because you as a leader need to know how your subordinate is going to react to a certain situation if they're 200 clicks away or 1,000 clicks away. But under stress, our brain starts reacting different ways.
Okay.
And if we're very well trained and we're aware that stress, battle stress, does affect us, and we can prepare for it, then the probability of us staying on line is much higher. But if you have subordinates who are on a flank, they're under heavy and advanced attack, their buddies' legs bleeding out, things are happening, all of a sudden they're going to start seeing the situation totally different. Your mind starts going through this do loop, this spiraling down where it says, I want to do this, I want to go back, I want to do this, I want to survive, I want to go back. And a lot of people freeze. They start inputting over the situation, a situational awareness that is based on, well, this is what it should look like, this is how I was trained it should look like, and the mind will just put something that totally isn't there. And so I'm just trying to make people aware that this cognitive suppression that can happen is a real thing, to be aware of it, and some of the training that people can do ahead of time to stay out of the spiraling well, because it happens to all of us.
I thought it was fascinating, and yes, folks, he really is a war game designer and developer, because I thought it was interesting. I got it, and I'll tell you what, some of the stuff you were talking about, I was looking at my Apple Watch, and I saw my heart rate going up, because you started describing a situation that the only way I can answer the questions you brought up was to relive it, and I didn't really want to do that.
Yeah.
And I said to you afterwards, I felt a little uncomfortable, but not in the way you think, and to me, I would love to see you give this to a different crowd, maybe at a company grade officer level, just to see how they would react.
Right.
Because at that point they're still not indoctrinated. It's like that thing from Men in Black. Thank you, gentlemen. We'll contact you, but you're definitely the product of years and years of government training. That I started seeing that in there, and I stopped seeing out of the box thinking. And then one of the guys made a comment, and I'm not castigating him, but it's like, I do this with my son. He wouldn't want to play the bad guy. He was in Iraq. I got to be honest with you. I feel the opposite way.
Right.
I would like to understand that.
Well, that's the problem. A lot of people also, the Taliban's just evil guys.
Yeah.
Now, why are they evil? What are they fighting for? What are their beliefs? Why do they think this way? And putting yourself in their position, number one, you're trying to get out of your comfort zone because you're thinking, oh, I'm playing the bad guy.
Right.
And then you start thinking different ways. But you can't think of everybody they're the bad guys, because the whole intent of any type of combat situation is to come to a good resolution. It isn't kill everybody.
Right.
It is get what we want out of the situation, and that seldom happens if you do not understand your enemy well, because a first step to freedom and peace is always dialogue.
Right.
Combat never works.
And for the folks out there that are war college grads, war is fought to coerce your enemy to do your will,
exactly.
what you will, and understanding your enemy is key. And I thought that comment to me was most interesting when it was made, and I kind of understand. My fascination has always been what was my enemy thinking? And it reminded me also, this is why I was uncomfortable, of going to Afghanistan, talking to one of my NCOs, and he was telling me, as a guy that understands how air power works, of how he would win this war. And I said to him, Jonesy, I'm not going to say his first name, I go, would you strap a bomb on your back and run into a Taliban tunnel? And he goes, no, I wouldn't do that. I said, but our enemy is. And how do you beat that? And that conversation has stuck with me now for 18 years.
Right.
And I always think about it. I was thinking about it the other day, I want to understand that, because, either I have to confront it and defeat it, and I need to understand it to do that. But if I need to make peace with it, I also have to understand that.
Right.
So, well, this is getting
everybody,
deep here.
and everybody in the world is the same. Everybody wants to have a job, safety for their family,
Right.
An intent where they feel fulfillment on a day-to-day basis. And that's where America is, I think, one of the beautiful, positive forces in the world, because we are trying to build up infrastructures in many ways. But that's not what my talk was about.
Right.
My talk was, and as I said, I didn't get past slide 3 out of 24.
I know.
And we never got to even get into, even in headquarters situations where what most people, one of the comments was, the brain is so sophisticated, can take and filter all information.
Yeah.
I'm
And your body language alone, you did one of these. People in radio can't see it, but it was like, no, you missed my point, was what you wanted to say. I got to, we're going to have to give you an opportunity to give the entire, I want to see all the pages, because reading them I don't think I'll get. Because of also the way, and also if you need a motivational speaker, this man sitting across from me is somebody I would hire. And, I'm going to invite you to work, which, hopefully you could donate some time. But I thought that was fascinating. I thought that was really interesting. And, because we've spoken before, and it was an amazing conversation, but seeing you there in action was good. But I want to talk about one other thing here.
Yes, sir.
Was, so I coerced, having your enemy or friends do what you will. A lot of them picked up Storm of Steel and Awakening the Bear, so there's a lot of gamers that are going to listen. So you were the force behind those great games.
Yes.
And version 3 is coming out, being shipped out soon, I believe.
Yeah, we had the maps made in Germany, because we have people in...
They're beautiful maps.
Yes, they're fully mounted. And the thing is, we have people we're shipping to, military officers, in very humid areas, in very dry areas, and they can't warp. So those we always have made in Germany. Mm-hmm. Then other components we make in China, and then we make as much as we can here in America. So they're all packed. They're being shipped out next week. So your copy, you're one of the first.
But I came to
15
Connections
people
to get it.
To have them after 4 years of development.
So I put it up, and I think as of now, 2,700 people have looked at that post with you, and I have your name on there, and people are like, "Oh, I love this guy." So if you're having a bad day, break glass, go look that up.
Oh, thank you.
One of the big things, and this is what people were asking me about, is what's different.
All right.
And Guadalcanal, I played Awakening the Bear. First game I bought from you was Guadalcanal. I love that game. We played it for 18 straight hours. It's an amazing game. But like the Death Star, it had a flaw for me. Mm-hmm. Was the activation system, where I couldn't fluidly move. And for those of you guys that don't play the game, is you would activate a unit, you would have 7 action points, and if you wanted to go to another unit, that unit, unless you use caps, you couldn't go back to it. It was kind of done. It was spent. Right. I felt that restricted me, but sometimes you play with a mechanic like that because the game relies upon it. But you guys fixed that.
Right.
And I know I never said anything to you about it, but I thought it. Why did you guys go and change that mechanic? Well, it's a big thing for the game.
Well, for the second edition, what we were going for was you as a commander, you're commanding your forces, and a commander under a stressful situation can only give his attention to one thing at a time.
Right.
So you're focusing, and if all of a sudden someone else is asking, screaming at you for information, you'll just give a real quick response, which is maybe not the best effect. It's just this gut feel heuristic. Mm-hmm. Could be a total bullshit response.
Yeah.
Or you have to cut the other person off. It's done, and now I'm going to concentrate on this. So that's what we're doing. But when we were at Quantico and working with our friends at the Marine Corps, they were saying for officer training, the young officers coming in, they're great firefighters playing one-man or first-person shooters.
Right.
And when I say a firefighter, meaning they hear fire reaction, they immediately react, and through their heuristic training, their training in field combat, they'll respond to it. Mm-hmm. But where they're finding out is as they're going up in rank, they cannot critically look at a map, see the combat situation, the situational awareness that they have, and put quickly a program in place to bring in correct positioning for suppressive fire, bring in mortar fire, artillery fire in an effective way, go into flanking position, do anything other than just forward an attack and bringing about the psychological impact that you need to get on an enemy to minimize your losses and maximize theirs, or even minimize theirs and make them lose their will to fight. And so what we did with Storm and Steel, the 3rd edition, Awakening the Bear, the 3rd edition rules, is you can use any unit you want, but there's a probability historically how a unit, most men don't want to go to fight.
Oh, yeah.
Don't want to go towards fire. When incoming artillery shells or bullets are coming in and you've got a heavy machine gun or an AA gun or anything like that nearby within 25 meters, guess what? You're not going to stick your head up because psychologically you're thinking, that thing is pumping out 1,000 bullets a minute. I'm only putting out maybe 15, 20. They don't need me. They put their head down and they start going down the spiral of cognitive suppression where they're not going to continue going in. So what we did is now you can jump from unit to unit as you want, but anytime you take an action, how that unit historically reacted, you then have to make a stress check. And if that stress check puts them into spent position, they're not going to react like if they pass it. Now, you can modify that stress as you as a commander. And that's why having a master sergeant going from flank to flank, making sure people are staying online is so critical. And they don't teach enough of that. They don't teach enough of psychological, emotional warfare against your own men or against another, because that's where the big difference comes. We're great. When we're ambushed in an Afghan position or something, or we do the ambush, 100% participation, boom, 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 things go great. But now you as a commander are going down a road in an armored column or semi or any type of surveillance, Vorspäher Situation, and you're ambushed.
We come with subtitles, so it's fine.
Then shit hits a fan. And then shitty things that in your normal training aren't going quite right like it did then. And then the emotional toll comes in. And that's, I think, where we have to give more training on so that officers know and can identify if a sub-officer or subordinate starts going down that spiral, how to pull them out.
You know, and I'm telling you this, if anybody that thinks that a mechanic is put in the game for an arbitrary reason just to piss gamers off, listen to what you just said for the last 2 minutes, because it shows you that there is rigor in that. And furthermore, one of the things that I saw was the same thing that the Marines came back and told you is, I understand about pushing the unit, and I understand about focus and attention, but I'm losing situational awareness. I want to pull it up a level. And you did that with the new system in the game.
Thank you.
What I worry about is people will think it's a simple, quick fix. And the other night, yes, I picked up all the games, and I was going through what you actually changed and what it represents in the game. And, I looked last night when I went back, and it's maybe about a paragraph and a half, and most of it's examples about doing a spent check. But that really shows about, in a battle, about where you can push, where, your main line of effort could be. You have a lead unit. Schwerpunkt. And it is it's a dynamic change to a game that sadly, I'm not making fun of anybody, few will notice because it was done that slick.
Yeah,
and
thank you.
It just kept going through my head like how much that changed the game, and it wasn't like, I'm so glad he fixed the one thing that I wish was different. Was it really changes, and then even playing it and watching other people play, it dynamically changes the experience you're getting. And it's 4 lines that you changed. I compared it to my Guadalcanal rules. It's like 4 or 5 lines and 2 special dice. And people are going to say, like, big deal. No. So
it's pretty huge, yeah.
If you guys have played 1st and 2nd edition and you're not jumping on 3rd, you have to. I mean, is there any way folks can get the die? I don't know. I mean, I am just so excited about this.
If anybody owns the 2nd edition rules, the 3rd edition are online for free. You don't have to change anything other than the 10-sided dice. People go, it's a 10-sided dice.
No, it's not.
No,
it's weighted.
There's so much psychology and probability that's put in because the dice are weighted with 2 1s. There's 1 2, 2 3s, 1 4, 2 5s, 6 and 7. Now, this is, again, a psychological thing to push people to start critically thinking, because now You're using your rare resources as a commander of where you can put your logistics, your subordinates, sending a lieutenant out, extra communication band, etc. You're now using that to bring the probability of a unit to continue. You can affect that, but you only have so much bandwidth that you can affect.
And I'll say, I'm going to paraphrase and mention one of your other games. It's one small paragraph for Academy Games. It's a major leap for everybody that's playing this game. It so changes the game. Now, the other game was amazing. Artwork alone, even if the rules were just like roll dice, have a good time, the artwork is beautiful, the game and the mechanics are slick, but it really started getting at me. It was preventing me from sleeping, of how much this drastically changes how this game is played. And wow, now I can pull out Guadalcanal and play it all over again.
Well, and this is just the first step. We're doing some really cool stuff. For example, our upcoming campaigns, it's not like other games where you play this, and if you win, go to this campaign. No, we're totally changing it now, where in a campaign, you're taking certain missions and objectives in the game, and if you take a flanking position or something like that, immediately there's a psychological effect on the enemy, because you want the enemy to quit fighting. Now, as you're taking objectives, you're pulling cards from the campaign deck that give you then the benefit for future campaigns.
Right.
And you're adding these to, if you've ever done our firefight generator, which is a totally different way of creating missions.
That's the only thing I don't have, but with the Rex, I think I'm going to get the firefight generator.
What Gunta did with that is, Gunta is the guy who did our Athena AI.
Well, he's more than just a guide to you, isn't he?
Pardon me?
He's more than just a guide to you.
Well, yeah, he's my son.
There you go.
Son of bitch, he's one of the top with patents and high-end. He's a DNA, molecular DNA origami. They make objects out of simple DNA.
Right.
And he's got patents on making tetrahedron consistently for industry, where that negative valence from the bottom pulls in medicine. You put in a rat with a protein marker, and it kills all leukemia cells in 20 minutes.
Yeah, I couldn't. I can't hang with your company. I would have to go get a PhD. I'm not that smart. I'm starting to.
No. You'd be our loving people. We're very direct Germans, so it's like, was willst du sagen? We're too direct sometimes, but
there's nothing wrong with that. Yeah, I think it's such a major change to the game. So actually, I started writing the article preview for this, just because there's so much to capture there. And maybe it was like, it could be just straight insomnia, and I was imagining it, but it's such a dramatic change.
Well, I'm going to give you a copy. We'll sit down later. I'll show you, because the mission generator, what that does now, you're now playing a series of engagements where you're building up the battlefield, and that's the genius of it. It's not, you get 100 points. No. You're getting a card combinations of objectives you've gotten in the past, and random from a pile of, for this type of situational terrain.
Right.
And you're playing back and forth, using your cards either for objectives and things like that, or for units, plus what you got in the past. And you're playing these. But what is so incredible about this, if you take the city, that'll give you certain advantages, but depending when you did it, whatever happened in the rest of the battle is influencing it. So if you get it within the first day, what happens and radiates forward into the future is totally different than if you take it in day 3. So everything you do radiates forward and changes. You never know how you're doing until all of a sudden a card comes up and says you've won a battle, or you think you're winning, you've been flanked, you're destroyed.
Interesting way to put dynamics into a game. So here's an interesting question I've been dying to ask, is you cater mostly your games to the hobby community, and you come to something like this, you're getting folks that don't play board games to sit down and play with you, and you ran through a lot of people. That was their first time pushing cardboard.
Yeah.
What have they said, and what have you noticed about them as they've been playing?
Well, the big thing is that most war games, and even with what the DoD makes, is still stuck in the 80s and 90s.
Yeah.
Their thought process, everybody thinks they can design good games, and it's like saying, okay, yeah, I can play basketball, and I'm going to play against professional NBA, It really is, there is a true art, and you really need to know what you're doing. And we give a lot of talks on this also to different places, DOD, and there it's all about decision, anticipation, resolution cycles, what we've termed the do loop. So as soon as you, with our designs, we have a very tight do loop so that you get a lot of endorphins and dopamine cycling going on the brain. So that's how we've done it. If we can teach a game in 4 to 5 minutes max, and you're playing and you're not looking at rules, no charts, it's all built into the modern gaming system, then you can tag anybody. So we're getting so many people who've been playing a lot of fantasy games and everything, who'd never play a war game, all of a sudden are playing war games now, learning about history, and all of a sudden it's opening their minds to a whole new genre.
Yeah, it was interesting a few times yesterday hanging back, because it's not what they say to your face, but they turn around to the guy they just played and they'll always make a comment. I was interested to hear what those were. So a little bit as, maybe voyeuristic, but I heard 2 wows. Wow, that was interesting.
Oh, good.
And it may seem like nothing to say it, but that to me is they just went through an experience. This is probably their first time playing.
Yeah.
That they got something from it from a 5-minute, hey, these are the rules, they're that basic.
That's good to hear.
You saw their motors turning. Plus, I also saw a lot of guys walking away with the boxes.
Yeah.
So it was extremely popular. So
we don't want to say that we were peddling it like drugs out in the parking lot.
And one drug reference per podcast is our thing. But it was like Jeff, the guy I work with, he's like, hey, let's wait for him so I could get my monster tanks. I go, don't worry, man.
Yeah.
Don't worry, you're new at this.
I pulled in the parking lot. I had 2 guys come up and we're selling out of the trunk.
Yeah.
And when I'm saying selling out of the trunk, I was giving copies, and we weren't.
I got a set of speakers from him too. It's like Blau pumped, so I don't know if it's the same thing. So, he said it fell out of a truck, but yeah, it was interesting to watch folks play. And it's one of the things I've gotten to be able to do from running events is to watch people and understanding. You also make an interesting point about gamers. Everybody thinks it's easy. We recently got permission to do user content for a couple of games because I'm tired of every gamer saying I can do better. And it was crickets.
Yeah.
And from being on the other end, it's if you have an ego, this is not the career for you.
Right.
Because you put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into something, and if it doesn't catch on or the lead developer's like, you're a moron, sometimes you are a moron.
Well, and that's where a big difference is, and I think we've been requested a lot to go around and help Wargame Development departments and give a little training class 2 or 3 days, because one of the problems is when you are creating games for a captured audience,
right,
it can be shitty. Most people, they are shitty, and they just go through it. They go through their blue, red, matrix-type game. Someone has to explain everything. You're sitting there listening half the time. You make a few heuristic decisions. Whereas we have to do it to bring out and make money.
Yeah.
Because that's how we make our money. If it's shitty, nobody's going to buy it. Our $90 Awakening the Bear sold 54,000 copies of a war game, and people say war games don't sell, and that's just the first in the series. So
yeah, you freaked me out when you told me that number, by the way, and I was very impressed.
Same with our 878 Vikings and all that. They're simpler games that we're getting out to schools and everything, but you have to hit that, as I say, that dopamine cycle.
So I want to ask you a crazy question. What is harder, developing a game for a DoD audience or developing a game commercially to sell?
Oh, for commercials. Because you gotta remember, the DoD audience are people who've been in the desert being fed sea rations, and all of a sudden they're given, I hope, a gourmet meal. Whereas out in the commercial market, there's 7,000 games, 7,000 published every year.
And that was a setup question.
Oh, I did not know. But I
knew the answer beforehand.
I'm too blunt, too.
You said something the other day that there's 36 games coming out a week. Did I get that number right?
There's 7,000 a year.
Right.
Of those, 36 major, incredible titles every week are being pushed into the full distribution store network.
Yeah.
And the problem is, in the old days, you had a good game, people would buy it, stores would buy it over and over again, and it had a long tail.
Not anymore.
Nowadays, all of a sudden, a store buys 12 copies, It sells out in the week. In the old days, they'd be ordering right away. No, because next week there are 36 more major titles coming out.
So,
what do you do?
Question 2, we've always asked, and I already know the answer. Are we in the golden age of gaming?
Oh, hell yeah, and it's going to keep going. It's not going down. I've heard some people mention that, we're at the tip and it could go down. No. We're seeing total opposite. We have so many veterans now coming out.
Right.
When they're overseas, they're being introduced to board games. The board game market has been growing at 15 to 18% a year compared to the video game market, which is
crazy.
like 8 to 10%.
Yeah.
So the board game market is growing because of the social interaction.
Right.
And board games give a total different training for military leaders than a video game, because all of a sudden, and this is where I talked with quite a few people here who do matrix games, where the blue team and red team are separated making their decisions, and then all of a sudden, through arbitrage, the white says what happens. The problem with that is you're not confronted with the mind games that the opponent can play on you. And that's what...
Do you need one of us, or...? No.
We're not doing any wireless broadcasting.
Yeah, don't worry about it.
Army come.
Oh, no. Yeah.
Oh, and this is going over to them? Well, hello, everybody in room 1.
No,
this is Mitch Reed.
It shouldn't be us.
I'm the guy you're hearing talking the whole time.
It totally shouldn't be us.
No.
Okay.
Tell you what.
And
I'm going to say the word, the guy who's doing all the talking, and Mitch Reed.
Don't do that, because we're on a government facility. Yeah, I don't think it's us. And this is the live aspect of the show that people love.
Everybody's listening. Hey, we got another presentation. So everybody in audience of room 1, you can come out here into the hallway and talk to Mitch and myself.
They're going to come beat my ass. And so the other thing too, that just going on Golden Age of Gaming, people thought PC killed the radio star. I'm like, no.
Yeah.
And even you have some of your titles on PC games.
Yes.
It's a different drug for me.
Exactly.
Where I got 10 minutes to kill. I'll do Storms of Steel on Steam, but social interaction, I'm playing this.
Yeah.
The other one, I can explain things better with a board than I ever can with a video.
Yeah.
And we had a briefer that actually mentioned that, and I felt kind of validated there. So, I mean, to me, it's, this is such a great time for gamers. But it's also bad because what I've seen too is to get a game that is everlasting, is harder than ever now, because there's a newness, there's a new hotness that's coming out every other week, and how much pressure are you guys under to keep up with that?
We don't have that problem. Every single one of our games ever that we've ever done, even our 10-year-old Awakening the Bear, gets reprinted every year. And our reprints are usually twice as big as a new game's reprint.
You guys don't do bad games.
Well, luckily, 80% of our games have won War Game of the Year.
I know, I've seen that.
And but like our Storm of Steel, we've got 12,000 pre-orders.
Wow.
So, a $90 war game that has 12,000, and I take that back. I'm totally talking out of my ass.
It's okay.
I'm sorry, I shouldn't say that word. I am talking amiss. We printed 12,000 pre-orders.
Right.
And of those, we're almost sold out. We haven't, that 12,000 number is how many we did in the first print run. Mm-hmm. But we're already looking at a reprint. So if you have a good game and you have good marketing, it all comes down to marketing. You can have the most genius, incredible game in the world. If you don't have the marketing, if you don't have the list, if you don't have the contacts, you're not going to do it. That's why a lot of people come to us.
Right.
Because for us, I'm not a war gamer. My thing isn't how good a game am I designing and all. That's not where I get my satisfaction is selling a lot of games and making a lot of money. That's my war.
So we talked about this yesterday, and look, I didn't have to ask a question to get there. You went there on your own. So I love guys that interview themselves. That people don't seem to understand that. And I see a lot of gamers that feel that there's a social contract between them and game companies of, why didn't you put this in a game, and why isn't this out? And they feel like it's almost kind of owed to them. And I said, game companies do what they need to do to stay alive. And if they were to cater to every small whim that a gamer has, we would have no hobby. We'd be playing with rocks. Do you think that's true?
Well, you try to go with what the market will buy. Mm-hmm. And what we know is this addictive crack cocaine of what makes a game.
Yeah.
And a lot of gamers don't understand that the one thing that turns people on is the decision-making cycle.
Right.
decision, anticipation, resolution. But the problem is most people think that it's a resolution. You're pulling the handle on your slot machine, you're watching the numbers go by, your anticipation goes up, you win money. Yay, that's when the dopamine's gone. Wrong, that's when they crash.
Yeah, you said that yesterday in the briefing.
When you make the decision to pull the handle. So win or lose, the more you can tighten up that cycle and all that. And that's why we have so many winning games, because we read more. I don't read hardly any history books. I can get 100 history experts. I read books on psychology, on the latest, outside of the DOD or anything.
It shows.
In civilian.
It totally shows. And, some of the things that you said over the last few days have really gotten me, it's, some very deep thought. And I could see that and your briefing yesterday, a lot of things I took with me. And you're right. It's, there's a million history books, and they're all from a point of view of somebody that I don't know. Yeah. But, things about human psychology and then applying that to this realm is something that game companies should look at, of where's the addiction? Why do I want to get another army? Why do I want to do this? There's a psychology there that I think a lot of companies miss out.
And implementing that into the game engine, that's what it's all about. Most game designers, and that's where I think a lot of people in the military branches, when they're designing games, a lot of them are, and no offense, but I'm a blunt German. This is what I think, is, you get PhD dudes out there who are trying to be total creative, and there are a lot of geniuses doing it.
Right.
But your average PhD dude's a PhD because he didn't get his degree or go right out and make $1 million on Kickstarter because he's a genius.
Right.
They're PhD dudes because they're great at reading stuff, regurgitating stuff they read. And they're the perfect guys to put the blanket over the genius engine. Mm-hmm. The genius engine, you got to get those rare minds out there. And I'm not one of them. I'm just a guy who can identify them.
Yeah.
And all our guys that we're getting in are all like biology, chemistry, mathematics guys who have maybe a master's and got bored. They don't want to go through graduate. They want to get right in the industry and start designing and making stuff.
Yeah.
And when we find these guys, we grab them right away. And those guys, you put 2 or 3 of those guys together in a room, holy cow, you get some stuff going.
So yesterday, and I know I didn't get a chance to introduce you to him, he was over here helping me run the game, this guy, Tyler Stone, who's one of our writers, and he's a Blood and Plunder quartermaster. And he goes, how do you get a job like this? And I said, you look for it, but we need guys like you. He goes, I don't even have my degree finished. I go,
who gives a shit?
Yeah. I said, look, man, no, that's exactly what we need. Because, if I talk to 10 people, I'm going to bash MIT. They went to MIT, I'm going to get the MIT answer. I need somebody that has not been overly indoctrinated in a way of thinking that I've heard it all before. And I find that is something that every community needs, especially one like this that needs to evolve, that needs to grow, that needs to innovate. One of the things, and probably one of my last questions, is one of the things I like about your games and from talking to you is the innovation, looking at it. Some of the other games and game companies, I see a lack of that. Sometimes it's a business model. Look, this worked well for us before. Let's keep going to this. I also see gamers hesitant to change as well. Is there any balancing act that you guys do with that?
No, I mean, like Conflict of Heroes, we've changed rules now radically. This is the third time where we've radically changed rules. I want to go back, though, one thing. When you were saying with people in the military and different departments getting really smart kids, one of the big things I see, and I've told this to everybody who complains about this, is, number one, you see a really smart kid ready to graduate. You say, we want to employ you. And then you put him in a waiting cycle for 7 to 9 months till he gets his classification rating. And well, you wait more than 2 months, he's gone. Secondly, why would a kid like that want to be bogged in some little cubicle in a basement under some stupid-ass major, working on one project, going tick, tick, tick? Guys like this, their brains don't work that way. So the DOD and our military needs to take this into account and say, okay, we're going to take these kids. We're going to give a free, like Google or Amazon or Apple, and make really think tanks are totally non-military structured, and take the genius that comes out of it, then give them to your PhD dweebs to put the blanket over who've got the classification clearance.
I so agree with you. However, I I like to say I'm a good example of a bad environment. I agree with you. We need to start doing things differently and looking at, I did education with industry as a military member where I went to Amazon and FedEx and how they do it. It's almost, we're going to have to wander the desert for 40 years to get rid of a generation of thinking that is not expanding at the rate that technology is in the information age. And then people are going to start getting blown away by this podcast. Like, man, you're going to make me read or think. But the government, especially within the DOD, we're not moving at that change. I mean, we're not changing that fast. And it's going to be 40 years of really waiting till this old thinking of, I need to stay in my box because it was safe yesterday and it'll be safe tomorrow, when that dies out. The bad thing about that kind of behavior is what would change it overnight is catastrophic.
Yeah.
And that's something I worry about. So, yeah, you're 100% right.
Well,
I can't change it. I wish I could.
On the other side, though, the DOD, it's a very complicated. We have a huge machine. This is like 50 of the biggest corporations all trying to work together. So I think we're doing an incredible job. And we are going in the right directions. So I'm a little more optimistic in this because I do think we are one of the most unique. We don't have the benefit of like Israel, where we're just a little country, and we've got to react like that. We get attacked, boom, these guys are on, boom.
Yeah.
But America, we're in a totally different situation.
Right.
This is like playing in a little ballpark league in a very constrained, we're worldwide leaders.
Yeah.
So we can't just go crazy. I think we're doing very well, but I agree. We have to understand we need high creativity circles that maybe don't need the clearance right away.
Well, I agree.
But leave it totally open and see what comes out. And we're going that way. And I think most leadership knows about that. And another part I was going to give in my talk is how do you get, with all the information hitting the leadership capability, they need to be trained to open their ears and get out of their little rut.
Yep.
Because every person in our company, they have to do Luminosity every day. That's a brain training exercise online to keep your brain sharp.
Luminosity.com.
I have nothing to do with them. But you know what? If our leaders were forced to do that every day, their brains would start working better critically and being able to take in new information.
Well, I hope.
But that's where the next millennial generation, once they get up there, I think you're right. It will change by itself.
I got to have you on for the next... we have to do this again because this is World Hunger thing. I think you and I can knock out in a half hour. I'm feeling very optimistic, but, we're getting on the point where, wow, people are going to say, this is a long time for me to listen. So I'm going to finish out with a observation, and then I'm going to ask two questions we ask everybody. One is, while you're here, I heard you say I'm German a lot, and it's, you make excuses for being German here in America. So when you go back to Germany, do you say I've been living in America too long?
No, I grew up in Germany, then we were in Venezuela, then we went to Puerto Rico. So when I came here at 15 years of age, 14 turning 15, for the first time, my whole cultural and outlook was German. Unfortunately, fortunately, we speak more German during the day than we do English. So our whole outlook, the way we were trained and when we went back to Germany and back, is raised a little different, very critically thinking. As our French partners always say, Uwe, you're the worst of the world because you're picky like a goddamn German and bossy like a goddamn American. And we say, well, you're welcome. At least you're getting something done for a change.
That's
not
true.
being disparaging. I'm just talking about my French partners, not French in general. So I do not want to.
We don't want to make fun of them.
Disparage. No. And so from that standpoint, our thinking is very German-centric. But I am 100% American when it comes to outlook, allegiance, everything else, because
I
we
know
are
that.
American.
I wasn't questioning that.
Even though we're all German citizens, going to my kids are all German, I'm German, but we also have American citizenship.
And I was explaining, we were talking about it before, just like you, I have an Oma.
Yeah.
She's not around anymore, and my mom used to say, you have to excuse her for being like this. She's German.
Yeah.
So when you say it, I laugh because that's just... I'm kind of used to that.
It's wie man aufwächst. It's how you're raised, you know?
It's how I was raised. And, up until the day she died, she was very German, which is another story. Not going to bore everybody here on the podcast. So it's funny that you say that a lot, and it's like, no, we're kind of a mixture here. So, German, really? I'm not saying you behave like my grandma. So our two last questions. One is...
Oh, you're such a good boy, though, Mitch.
Oh, I appreciate
you're
that,
a good
man.
boy.
She was German. She never said that.
Oh, she did never say that?
No.
Oh,
no,
wow.
No.
Okay.
She was like, it was like I used to call her the Iron Kaiser.
Wo ist mein Tee?
Yes.
It's 3 Uhr.
That's right. Yeah, it's almost tea time. So two questions. We ask everybody in your position about spoilers, but before that, give me the first game you fell in love with and the game that you would pick tomorrow to go play that you don't design.
Okay, the first game I fell in love with was Squad Leader. When we first came to America, we did a tour out west, and my father was pissed off. We had a Winnebago that we'd rented, and we're going through the beautiful parts of the country. He says, Uwe, guck nach draußen. Guck dir die Welt mal an. Look at outside. And I'm sitting there going, Dad, no. I'm taking over the factory in Stalingrad here.
Scenario 2? Or is that scenario 1?
I think 2 or 3. And I'm sitting there just eating up Squad Leader.
Mm-hmm.
I don't play war games usually.
Right.
I play all the Euro games because that's where all the incredible advancements are coming in. Games, I don't play my own games hardly at all because that's not how you learn.
Right.
So I play games, incredible games out there. One of my biggies that I tell people, check out Spaceport. It's a fun, fast half-hour game. Twilight Struggle, one of the best games
ever
made. Other games I've been playing, I love Star Wars Ascension. It's a great game. So I play all different type of games, seldom war games.
That's awesome. And then the last thing...
Because I want to say...
Yes?
That's from my German heritage. I've always been taught we're not an aggressive race.
Right.
We're a race that likes beer and cars.
That's true.
That's a propaganda that I was given.
Was I given that? No, I don't think so. And then the last question, before we send it back to the studio, is spoilers. Tell us what's coming out next. We may or may not know about. Tease us. Spoil.
Well, we're doing the Stellaris. The Stellaris people loved so much what we did with the Agents of Mayhem, the Saints World universe. So the Stellaris, the biggest 4X space game.
Right.
It's a fully radiant storyline campaign. Anything you do affects. You're building up your empire, your race. If you love Stellaris, it's coming out next year. We got the license from Paradox Games.
Awesome.
Then we are, after our Fog of War, we're doing the Korean War. And as people know, if they did our Strike of the Eagle, which was the Polish-Soviet War of 1920, where if you're even doing a correct military engagement, what are the geopolitical ramifications for this?
Using the instruments of national power.
So it's all interwoven. And then we're working on that on modern-day Ukraine situation. Then we have another game coming out, which we haven't told anybody. So the High Command, which is it's the logistics of the warfare of World War II.
I'm already seeing my bank account going down.
And then last but not least, which is... Oh, and we're really pushing is the old Jim Dunnigan Panzergruppe Guderian. We totally stripped it, reworked it, no more charts, and it's Guderian's Harvest.
Wow.
And we talked to Jim and wanted to get him involved, and he says, Uwe, you do good games. I don't need to be part of that.
So in the next year?
Those are all going to be early next year coming out because they're in their final parts.
What's your next Kickstarter?
Our next Kickstarter is a very cool... there's a grin coming. It's a 3-dimensional game, and it's a first in the series that is going to be a 3-dimensional. Everything is magnetically held. Where we're going for not only the next game in the series, 3-dimensional combat for systems, but also in space. So you have 3-dimensional, no up or down like Ender's Game, but then also taking effect. With the information flow, the mind flow, everything going in, that's going to be a really out there game again. It's about as far out as we've gone with new creativity.
Cha-ching, cha-ching, cha-ching.
And that's what we love. Give me your money.
Yeah, and
it sounds bad, but we have so many people now, really good that we're paying full-time salary.
Yep.
A company has to think about that. You put out shit.
Right.
Putting out 20 crappy games is not as good. We spend usually 2 to 3 years developing a game. It takes a lot of time. But when it comes out, it's usually a really good game.
I'll tell you why. Being from New York and having an OMA, not a trusting person a lot of times. I'll tell you why I was impressed trusting you is I talk to a lot of game developers, often online, on the record, off the record. We want to put out something for the community. We want to this. Not you. You're honest. And I think I feel they want to believe that they're doing, hey, we really want gamers to enjoy this and that. But the bottom line is they're a business. And us as the community needs to understand that. They need to make money. And that's why your candor was so refreshing.
But but we have to be true, too.
Yep.
We really work to get a message like our Freedom Underground Railroad about slavery. That is a game that we really purposely, to get these kids who are, or even adults, who come from a really white redneck family.
Right.
You put them in a situation where they're playing an abolitionist movement. You can tell them as much as you want. Being prejudiced and all is wrong. You have to accept people. But when you're playing a game and you're trying to win, everybody always tries to win when they play a game.
Right.
They're taking on the role of as abolitionists against anti-slavery and all that. It shifts their focus. As we like to say, it's a slight indoctrination. And that's not a good word in America, but indoctrination correctly to be open to other people is very key. So again, we're working now with the National Indian Councils on the Cherokee Cheyenne type of genocide that went on in the Kentucky and Ohio valleys during the American Revolutionary War. We're looking at that now. And you're playing as the Cherokee nations, and the bad influence coming in is from the white settlers.
There's a question I want to ask, but I have to wait till we're offline now because I can't ask it here, and you'll know why when I tell you. But personally, I want to thank you. After talking to you and going back and forth, it was a pleasure meeting you, and I will see you definitely again. I need to have you on again as more stuff is coming out, and you're going to hear it here first. I'm looking at doing a Conflict of Heroes at PerezCon 2020. I got to contact PerezCon first, but NDNG, we're looking at doing that. So hopefully we'll see you there.
And hopefully, I do plan on being there, and I really appreciate it, man.
Awesome. We're going to have a good time. Thank you for coming on, and I'm going to send it back to Sean in the studio.
Thanks so much for joining the show tonight. Remember to follow us on Twitter at No Dice, No Glory. And keep the conversation going on NoDiceNoGlory.com, now featuring our own message boards. Have a great night, everybody.